Welcome everybody to this very special episode of TimeXtender Tuesdays. Not only is it our 30th episode, I'm super excited to finally get to demo the next generation of the TimeXtender Data Estate Builder. This September 2022 release has a ton of new features. From portal administration to ODX documentation, executing PowerShell, a brand new PowerBI Premium endpoint, it's all here. First, let's talk about how to get access to the new version. If you're an existing partner and you don't already have access, please reach out to your solution specialist and they can get you set up with an account. If you don't know your solution specialist, simply email support@timextender.com and they can get you set up. If you're an existing customer and you want to try out the new version, please reach out to your partner so they can get you set up with an account. If you don't have a partner or you're not yet a customer, you can easily access a trial of the new version. Let me show you how. To get to the new portal, open a web browser and simply type in app.timextender.com. Here you're going to be presented with the sign-in page. If you have an account, simply put in your email and password and click login. If you want to access a free trial, you click on this link right here. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Once you're signed into the portal, and if it's your first time signing in, you'll see a box right here that talks about getting started with the new version. If you don't see the box, you can go to Help and Support and scroll to Get Started with TimeXtender. To get to the instances, you either click Add Instance or click the Data Estate dropdown and click on Instances. Once you're here, you can click on Add Instance. Now, the ODX is the foundation of TimeXtender. It's how you add data sources and ingest data. You can't do much else without that. So you need to add an ODX first. Click to add an ODX. You can put in the instance name and all the other information to connect to your instance storage or your ODX storage in this case. We still support all the same storage types like ADLS Gen 2, Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and of course, SQL Server Database. Once you've put in all your credentials, you'll notice the ODX server connection information. This is important because when you're accessing TimeXtender Desktop, it's likely installed on a client machine. However, your ODX server should be running from a centrally located app server. This here is the host name or IP address of that app server where the ODX server service is running. This is how TimeXtender Desktop knows how to contact the ODX server. In this case, I'm running everything locally, so I can just put in localhost. Once you have everything inputted properly, go ahead and click Save. So I've created my ODX instance. Now we can look at our data warehouse instance. In the data warehouse instance, you want to, of course, put in an instance name. You'll notice team development option that was located in project settings previously. And here we have the server name, server type. Of course, you can still get access to the same storage types that you could before. Put in all of your information. And you also have the transfer from ODX option here. So you can use the ADO.NET technology, which will use the compute power of the server that's running your ODX server service, or you can switch to Azure Data Factory that automatically generate ADF pipelines to move the data from your ODX storage to your data warehouse storage. Now, a couple of things you'll notice about these instances is there's some project setting information in here as well. Now, there are no longer any projects in TimeXtender. They've been replaced by instances. So each instance is its own project. This means now that version control and moving between environments are all handled per instance, which is really cool and adds for a lot of flexibility. You can also add a semantic model instance. This, of course, is fairly straightforward. You provide an instance name, and then you can add multiple endpoints for every semantic model that you have. As you can see, I've already added quite a few instances here. Let's go ahead and take a look at adding data sources. Click on Data Estate and then Data Sources. here's where you can add your data sources. You'll see I already have some already added, but I want to click to add a new data source. One of the really neat things about having data sources added in the cloud is oftentimes in an organization, the people using TimeXtender Desktop are not the same people that know all of the passwords for all of your different data sources throughout an organization. So what you can do in the latest version of TimeXtender is you can simply send someone a link, give them access to the portal. They can then go in and put in all of the data connection information and credentials to this data source. They don't have to copy connection strings and passwords and API keys and send those around in an insecure manner. You can now insert the connection credentials here securely and then allow access to that data source to different people using TimeXtender. I'm going to go ahead and add a TimeXtender SQL Server data source. So of course we want to put in a name, and you do need to put in a description. Here I'm going to put in my server credentials. Great. And you'll notice all of the same connection information that was available in the TimeXtender Desktop is now available in the portal. Once you've put in all of your configuration information, go ahead and click Add. Now you can see my new data source added right here. Now, the next thing we need to do as soon as we add a data source is we need to assign it to an ODX instance. So that way that ODX instance can use that data source. So I'm going to go back here to my ODX dev instance, click on that, scroll all the way to the bottom, and then you can see here mapped data sources. So I want to map that newly added data source to this ODX instance. Go ahead and map that there. Now, of course, I'll also have other users working with me. So I'll need to invite them in to the portal so they can log into the desktop. To add a user, you click on Admin and then Users. Then click Add. Go ahead and put in the name of the user. And then you want to select all the necessary permissions. A company admin can manage all the company's users, instances, and basic information. A customer manager can add or edit customers and their information. This is typically for partners. And then a data estate admin can manage all the instances, as well as add data sources. I'm just going to give all the permissions to this user. And then you want to be sure to click Send Sign-In Invitation. This is going to send an email to this email address right here, which allows them to then create a password on their own. Go ahead and click Add, and this will add the user. One of the great things about handling authentication with user logins is not all users have to have access to all instances. So once you create a user, you have to give them access to the instances you want them to be able to access. So you click on Data Estates, Instances, and then pick an instance you want to give them access to. Scroll to the bottom and click Grant Access. Select the user and then click Grant. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. When you open TimeXtender for the first time, you'll be presented with this screen. You'll have to sign in. You want to use the same sign-in information that you used to sign into the portal. This is super cool because you no longer have to mess around with license keys or client secrets. You just sign in with your username and password, and it's that easy. Once you've signed in, you'll get to see all of your instances here on the left-hand side. So all those instances I created in the portal are now visible right here for me. Let's go ahead and get started with the ODX instance. I'll double-click on the ODX instance, and that will open the instance for me. Now, if this is your first time opening an instance, you want to right-click on the instance and click Edit Instance. And then you want to click Create Storage. What this will do is this will create the database or the Azure Data Lake container that you specified in the Azure portal. And that'll ensure that that container or the storage database gets created. Once you've done that, you can, of course, test the storage connection to ensure TimeXtender can connect to that storage. Of course, you'll need to do that in your data warehouse instances too, if that database doesn't already exist. As you can see here, I have my data sources. I've already added a couple. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like to add another data source. I've already created the connection in the portal, but now I have to configure that data source with this ODX. Right-click and add a data source. Give that data source a name, click Next, and then I can select that data source connection from the menu right here. So I'll select that connection. These are the connections that were created in the portal. I'll click Next, and then I move right to configuring that data source because I don't need to put in the connection information. Here I can go in to select which tables I want to bring in. Now selecting tables in the ODX are so much easier. We can simply go through and select the tables we want to bring in. Once you've selected the tables you want, you simply click Add. You have them all in the list here, and on the right-hand side you can see how many columns are selected from those tables. But maybe I'm not sure exactly which columns I want. This sales order header has 26 columns. Do I really need 26 columns? I don't know. Let's take a look. Click on Select Columns here, and we can preview that table right away. From here, I can simply go through, remove all, and just pick out the columns that I want. And I easily get to go through and select which columns I want just by previewing that data, seeing what's available, and clicking the columns that I want to add in. Let's go ahead and click OK, and now I've selected those columns. So by being able to preview the data, it just makes it that much easier to go in and pick exactly what tables and what columns you need. If you do want to see the advanced table selection that we had before, if you prefer that option, that's still available in this button right here at the bottom. Once you've selected your tables, click Next, and we want to go ahead and add a transfer task. I'm just going to call this Transfer All because I want to transfer all my tables. Click Next, and All Tables, and click Finish. Now let's set up incremental load. Right-click on the data source, click Set up Incremental Load. Here we can add a rule. I know in this data source, the column contains modified date. And here we have a new feature, the subtract from value. This is a really cool feature. Some data sources have a specific period of time where they allow transactions to be updated, or maybe that data source just doesn't indicate the modified date very well. This allows you to roll back that date in time. So you can pull an entire, let's say an entire day's worth of records. Rather than having to go back and do a full load, you can just say, well, let me pull in all the last 24 hours worth. So let's go ahead and set that up. You have two boxes here. If your incremental rule is a, let's say it's an integer or some other type of field, not date time, you want to use this value. If it is a date time field, you want to use this value. So let's go back 24 hours. All right. And of course, we still have the option to do primary key updates and deletes. Go ahead and click OK and hit refresh. This is going to go through and identify we have last max value minus that many seconds, which I'm assuming is 24 hours. Go ahead and click OK. And now we've set up incremental subtraction. There's also a new task within the storage management task. So you click on Add Storage Management Task, and let me call this Incremental Rollup. So the way that incremental load works in the data lake is it creates a new Parquet file every time there's an incremental load that happens. That Parquet file only keeps the data that has changed since the last load. However, if you're running, let's say every day, maybe even every hour, that's going to add up to a lot of Parquet files over time. And then querying across all those Parquet files can become very time consuming. So it's good practice to take all those Parquet files and every so often roll them up into one large file. That's exactly what this task does right here. So you can select roll up incremental data with Azure Data Factory. You put in your information for Azure Data Factory, and you indicate the size of the rollup file. So you can put in megabytes here, the minimum and maximum size of the rollup file. It'll look through your Parquet files and ensure to roll those up so you have larger chunks of Parquet files and not a bunch of little tiny batches there. Click next to go ahead and create that. And of course, I need to put in all this information. So I'm going to skip that for now. All right. So the next really cool thing about data sources is I've done some configuration here, right? I've set up incremental load. I've done table selections. I've done field selections. But let's say my data source has changed, or maybe I want to use this configuration on another data source too that's identical. Maybe it's on a different server, but the configuration is the same. Now we have the ability to not only clone a data source. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to call this Chicago ADF and then click OK. This will copy that data source configuration that I have right here. And now that I've copied it, I have the option to go in and change the provider. Now you can do this on any data source, existing, copied, whatever. You right click on that data source, you click Edit Data Source, and you click Change. And then I can go in here and use my ADF connection. So I do have another connection. It goes to the same database, but it uses Azure Data Factory to load that data instead. So let's say you want to use Azure Data Factory, but you don't want to have to go in and reconfigure your entire data source. So you can just swap out that connection, click OK, and now we've changed our data source connection. Same data source, configuration, same table selection, same incremental load, but I'm using a completely different connection for that. Super, super cool. All right, let's take a look at the data warehouse features. So let's go ahead and open my data warehouse in a new tab here. So looking at our data warehouse, we see we have a number of different tables. Let's take a look at some of the new really cool features that we have. First and foremost, in data warehouses is the new data areas. So prior to this release, you could create multiple different data warehouses in a single TimeXtender project and then map across that. Now that functionality is still supported. The only difference is now it's done with inside of a single data warehouse instance and a single data warehouse storage. Now, this is really best practice anyways. You keep your DSA and your MDW in the same database, especially when you're using something like Azure SQL database. So now we can click on data areas and add a data area. The important thing to understand is this is in the same database as my MDW data area, but I'm going to give it a different name and let's see what happens. We'll click OK, and we'll have here our database schemas are automatically set to DSA as default. In this instance, when I created this data area, my default schema was MDW. So I still have that option to go in and use the same data area, the same instance if I want, or if I want to split that across two different data areas, do all my transformations in one data area and my presentation layer in another, I can still do that. It's just now separated by schema, which is really best practice. So that's another really cool feature here that we have. All right, so we've moved all of our data in this database. Let's take a look at another new feature called mapping sets. So we know that many data warehouse implementations have multiple different data sources that are the exact same schema but have different names, right? So let's say you have for example, a Dynamics AX ERP or Dynamics Nav ERP, where each company that you might have is in a different database. So you'll connect to those using different databases here in the ODX, but now a new mapping sets feature allows you to bring in all the tables that match a specific search criteria into a single mapping set. So let's use this sales order detail as an example. I'm going to right click here and click Add Mapping Set. Here I'm going to put in sales give it a name, sales order detail, and then I'll add a rule. This is going to be my search criteria. Table is equal to, we'll put here contains, ignore case, sales order detail. Yeah. And I want to include the matches in this search criteria. Click OK, hit refresh. This is going to look through the other data sources that I have to find matches for that table. So we can see here I found a match in Chicago. I also found a match in my Seattle instance of this data source. So it says it's found new tables. Do you want to apply the changes? I'll click yes. And here I have that mapping set. So I had this existing mapping here. Now that table is actually included as part of this mapping set, so I can go ahead and delete that one. So this is really neat because as I add additional data sources in the future, all I have to do is right click on this mapping set and hit synchronize. It'll automatically find those additional tables that match the search criteria and include them into the mapping set for me. So that is super cool. All right, so I've brought in new tables using my mapping sets. Another really cool feature here is data profile. What if I'm looking at a table and I want to understand, okay, how is that table set up? How many uniques are on that table? I can go here to data profile. We can see here that row count, we have a 701 rows on this table. If we scroll through, we see different names. There are 699 unique names in this table, but there are 701 rows. That is interesting. Salesperson ID. So we can see the average number, demographics. So some really cool information here that we can see minimum and maximum values. Really gives us a quick way to look into these tables to find out what is the layout of a table and how can I start working with it. Also, this pattern search is really cool. When we go here, name, for example, if I go to pattern search, maybe I want to know, okay, how many of the rows start with the letter A? So I can just put in A and hit search, and it'll just give me a list of all of those name values that start with the letter A. So really neat way to just get a high-level overview of a table, start analyzing that data really quickly. Okay, data profile. Now there's also the option for context-sensitive help. This one is super exciting. Have you ever been in TimeXtender and wondered, man, I'm just not quite sure how to use this feature? Say, for example, in this one, just not quite sure what are these options for? Well, now you can click the question mark up here. This will open up a web page that goes directly to our support site. And if there is a support page for this option, it'll go directly to that KB article that covers that information. So you can see right in here, which jumps right in, and we can see everything about everything that's in this dialog box here, simple mode, so on and so forth. So that's going to make new users' experience that much easier, just being able to hit that question mark and getting to the right knowledge base article for that specific area of the platform. Okay, oh, this one is very exciting. Executing PowerShell. So you'll notice in here the execution is right under here under the instance. You double click that and I have external executables. You can right click on that and click add execute PowerShell script. So this is very exciting because PowerShell is really powerful. You can do just about anything, whether you're on-prem on a Windows machine or working in Azure. PowerShell, you can write a script that will do it for you. So some things to know first about PowerShell is in order to get this to work, you do need to set up some policies on your machine. So I'll put some links in the description of this video so you can take a look at what to do there. But you'll need to update your PowerShell execution policies. These are some example scripts that you want to run in PowerShell on your machine before you can actually go in and use it with TimeXtender. So you'll need to update your execution policies to allow you to run these scripts. And then you'll need to install the Azure AZ PowerShell module if you want to execute things in Azure. and you'll need to sign into Azure using the connect-az account script. So I'll include these links in the description, but it's a good thing to know, to be aware of before you start running into errors there, trying to execute PowerShell. So I've added some cool PowerShell scripts in here that control my Azure SQL database. Let's see, right now, let's look at this view. I created a view here to give me information about the Azure SQL database that I'm running. And you can see right now, this is a general purpose Gen 5 8. It's currently online, right? Now, let's go ahead and scale this up to a premium. If I edit that, you can see this is that PowerShell script right here as an example. I can go ahead and hit execute. This will run for just a few minutes. It takes about 2.5 minutes. All right, so the PowerShell execution finished, and you can see here we get a message, talks about what is my current compute tier now. It's set up to premium. Click OK. Go back here, and let's preview this view once again. And you can see now it's changed from serverless that it was general purpose serverless. Now it's a premium P1 tier. So again, just a really cool example there of what you can do with PowerShell. You can take these executables, you can also put them inside execution packages. So I'll add a package here, and we'll call this MDW, because I want to execute my MDW. But before I execute my MDW, I want to make sure that, of course, it is a premium tier, right? So put that up there. Just before executing MDW, we want to run the premium tier, and then after the MDW, we can scale it back down to basic. What a cool way to save a ton of money, scale it up, run your ETL, and then scale it back down again. All, again, fully automated and scheduled within TimeXtender. So you want to adjust your threads, of course, change this to execution time. Make sure not to check merge steps here, because merging the steps here will could possibly mix these up. You want to make sure to run these in the order specified in include steps. So don't check merge steps if you're running something like this. So go ahead and click OK and save that execution. All right. Now that I've made the changes in my MDW, I want to take these changes that I've made and I want to move them to production. So, but I don't want to move, I'm still making changes here in my semantic models. I'm still making changes in my ODX. So I don't want to move those. I just want to move my MDW. And now with the instances, we can absolutely do that. I'll right click here on my MDW dev. And of course, I want to save that instance. So let me copy to instance. And of course, it's going to ask me to save. Do you want to save your changes? Yes. So let's save my changes to that instance, create a new version. It'll allow me to save version notes and roll back to previous versions. All right, it's saved the instance. And now it's bringing up the copy to instance option. So I only have one other instance that matches this instance type. So it's pulling that up for me automatically. I can select which version I want to transfer. And let me go ahead and just click OK. This will copy all the metadata here from my dev instance over to my production instance. This is super cool because now I'm doing multiple environment transfer here without any previous setup outside of the portal, right? I created my instances in the portal, defined those. All you have to do is copy to instance. None of this complicated setting up environments and setting up different port numbers and global databases. And okay, so now let's go ahead and look at semantic models. Go ahead and double click my semantic model instance and open that up. And that'll open this instance right here. As you can see, I already have a couple tables, order date and product. I want to bring in my purchase transactions table. So I'll drag that in, drop that right here. And as you can see here, I'll just select the fields that I want to bring in, the order ID, and then a few of my measures. And then I'll click OK. And here you'll notice I'm able to, just like before, where I have a relation, this is an existing relation, I can select that. But now we also have the option to where TimeXtender automatically suggests primary or relationships based on the primary key of the dimension. So here we have this one-to-many relationship. This is the one that we'll want to select, and we'll click OK. And now I have those relations just brought in for me. So I didn't have to define that relation here on my product table, and I have it brought in for me automatically. So that is super cool. Now let's talk about endpoints. So before I mention a couple of new really cool endpoints we've added into the latest release, let's go ahead and get those in here right now. So I want to go back to my portal. Back in here, let's go to my instances, click on purchasing dev, and here is where I can add in my additional endpoints. So I simply go in and select endpoint type. I can add the new CSV endpoint, click add, and here we'll just call this CSV. Okay, then I simply scroll down and I've added that endpoint, and I also want to add another endpoint. Now let's go ahead and add our PowerBI Premium endpoint. I'll click add, select that PowerBI Premium. I'll call this PBI Premium. Okay, and then we put in our server name. Our server name, in case you're wondering, can be found in Power BI. If you go to Power BI, go to your premium workspace that you have here set up, click on settings, click on premium, and then you'll be able to scroll to the bottom and you'll see workspace connection right here. So you just copy that URL, go back to the portal, paste that in for the server, and then give a name to your data set. In my case, I'm going to call it purchasing. And then you want to put in the username and password that you use to log into Power BI. Go ahead and click save. That will save that information. Both those endpoints are now added. I have my CSV endpoint and my Power BI endpoint. Let's go back to TimeXtender. So back in TimeXtender, I want to refresh my instances. This will take a look and make sure and reload any new metadata that's available from the portal. So in my case, I added 2 new endpoints, and those are now going to appear right here for me. So we see those 2 new endpoints here that I have, my Power BI Premium endpoint and my CSV endpoint. So you want to go in here and make sure you can connect to these endpoints and make sure all is good. So you can right click right here on purchasing and go to edit instance, and you can test your endpoint connections. So I can connect to that folder that I put in there. And then here, let's make sure I can get connected to Power BI Premium. Test connection. All right, and this is using multi-factor authentication here to make sure I'm signed into Power BI. All right, I'm successfully connected. Great, so we'll click OK. Okay, now before we deploy and execute, I want to talk about synchronization in semantic models. So let's take a look at purchase transactions, and let's say, for example, this order quantity field. Let's say that for whatever reason you decide, you know what, I'm going to delete that field, and then for whatever reason you want to bring it back, but you bring it back and let's say it's a different name. All right, order quantity, right? Like that. All right, so we have order quantity now brought in as a different name. We save our data warehouse instance, and then we take a look at our semantic model, and we synchronize that semantic model. So you right click, click synchronize. It'll synchronize the changes and present them here for us. So if we look here through the list, we'll see purchase transactions, order quantity. We know that's now order quantity. We select that field and click OK. And now our semantic model is still intact, mapped to the new field. So now that I have that remapping, let's go ahead and deploy and execute our semantic model. Okay, deployment's complete. Let's look at Power BI. Usually it just pops up right here, but yes, and there it is. So it created our model. So we can see we're deploying directly to Power BI Premium. We've created that model, and let's let that execute. But while that's executing, we can actually take a look at our model and see what we have available. We can see here when it was last refreshed. We can also see all of those tables and fields that we brought in using TimeXtender. So super cool, and very, very excited about that new feature. Also executing the CSV endpoint, as you can see. Let's go ahead and open that up in a new window. Now all available right here. All right, let's close that up. Last, let's look at creating jobs. So we do need to create an execution package here for our semantic model. We have the default package. Let's go ahead and add one. And we do want to do, in this case, let's just do PowerBI Premium. We can select which endpoints we want to add, and we'll create that execution package there. All right, and then we can go to jobs. So I'll click add a job. Before you can schedule these jobs, you do need to go in and run the job configuration.exe. So let me show you first how to do that. Go ahead and go into your C drive. Go to Program Files. Go to TimeXtender. Find the appropriate version. And then scroll down to the TimeXtender job execution configuration.exe and launch that and run that. What this does is this defines which instances you want this machine to be executing, because it might be that you'll want some executions done on a dev machine, other executions done on a production machine, and so this option allows you to define which machines are going to do the execution for which instances. All right, so then we go to jobs. Let's go ahead and add a job. We'll call this nightly load. Go to next, and here we have our ODX. And we have our different tasks here. We can define which tasks we want to bring in. For this one, let's just run our Chicago transfer and our Seattle transfer. Click next, and we can define when we want to execute that. This is all in UTC, of course. Let's say we want to run this every day of the week, and we want to restart the task. We can say every 30 minutes, every hour. In this case, I'm just going to run it every day at 4 a.m. Finish that up. All right, and that was everything for the new version. I'm super excited for all the new features and functionality in the latest version, all the new possibilities that's going to open up. I hope you are too. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, reach out to your solution specialists, and I'm sure we'd be happy to answer those very quickly. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.